It's the show where Hawaii's newsmakers come to talk and to take your questions live. From the nation's capital to Honolulu Hale, from the state legislature to the fifth floor, we bring the experts to you and ask them what you want to know. Spotlight Hawaii with Yanji Denise and Ryan Kalesuji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
Well, aloha and thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Hawaii live on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. I'm Ryan Kalesuji, joining you live this afternoon where I am all the way on the East Coast in Virginia following the Hawaii men's volleyball team and their title run for another national championship. But of course, Yanji Denise is back home in Honolulu. One of the beauties of doing this show remotely is that we can still stay connected, obviously. And this morning, we are going to be tackling a topic that has become very important, of course, during COVID-19, but a discussion that continues on right now.
That's right. We want to focus the spotlight today on food insecurity in Hawaii. It's a problem that many of us don't see, but is quite ubiquitous. We have two experts on with us this morning. We want to welcome Amy Miller Marvin, the president and CEO of the Hawaii Food Bank, along with Daniela Spoto, Hawaii Appleseed's director of anti-hunger initiatives. Thank you both for being here this morning.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
So, Amy, I want to start with you, and we're going to talk about why we've invited you on, which is really that, federal relief dollars have gone away as of last month, and we are expecting that to have very deep implications for our community. But if you could just lay the land for us and give people sort of a snapshot of what this problem looks like in our community, who experiences food insecurity, and what you're seeing at the food bank.
Sure. So, we think probably about 250,000 people are experiencing food insecurity in Hawaii. It's about 1 in 6 individuals, including 1 in 4 keiki. So we have one of the highest rates of childhood food insecurity in the country, which is really hard to believe. We live in a really amazing place. People support each other, and yet there are folks that are really having a hard time making ends meet and putting food on the table. So the federal SNAP benefits that ended, this was part of the end of the declaration of the federal pandemic emergency, but the impact that had on many families, we had about 90,000 households in Hawaii that were receiving an extra about $200 a month in SNAP benefits. So we know in other parts of the country when those benefits ended that they saw what we were terming a hunger cliff. It wasn't a spike, but it was a cliff, a real significant increase in the number of people that needed to get extra help to make ends meet and put food on the table. So for us, we've been seeing continued up increases. This past month, we haven't been able to close our books yet and really look at the numbers, but we are looking to see how many more people we've started to serve because of the end of the SNAP emergency benefits.
And Daniela, from your organization, if you can share a little more about and provide context from what you've experienced and what you've noticed as we transition out of the pandemic and some of the needs that were highlighted during that time based on and compare that to where we're at now and just any concerns moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Like you said, the pandemic really highlighted this issue. It really brought it to the forefront in a way that it hasn't been for a long time. And it's not that it didn't exist before, but it is, it was striking to see, not just in Hawaii, but nationwide, all of these lines at the food banks, people losing their jobs. And I think even though we don't see it on the front pages as much anymore, the issue is still there. And we have not returned to the pre-pandemic rates of food insecurity. And a lot of this is a lot to do with our, Hawaii's cost of living. It has to do with inflation rates. So there's a lot of underlying factors that are happening. But to echo what Amy said, this is not an issue that is, unique to people that, don't have resources or have, mental health or don't have family. This could be anyone. It could be, a neighbor, folks that we interact with day to day. Food insecurity really just looks like, not being able to afford enough food for a healthy life. And sometimes it means putting your food on your credit card. So you might not see it. It could just be invisible, but people around us are all experiencing it.
Yeah, Daniela, go a little deeper on that. When we talk about food insecurity, what exactly does that mean? How if you could quantify that, what does that actually look like in a day-to-day for an average family?
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, it looks like just buying the cheapest food that's out there, filling up on empty calories, as much ramen and spam, anything you could buy at, the convenience store. So just looking at, what is the cheapest calories I can get into my body and my family's body. In other cases, it might look like, you go to the grocery store and you get to the cash register and you go to pay and your card is declined. So you pull out your credit card and you go into debt to afford groceries for your family. And then, in other cases, it's opening your fridge and literally having nothing to feed and having to go to the food bank. So there's different range of how it could look, but it's not always as visible as we think it might be.
Amy, I'm wondering if you can provide a little more context into the types of people that we are seeing. I think that often the misconception is food insecurity equals homelessness. These could be everyday working people who have a steady job, live in a home, but still are struggling to make ends meet, as Daniela highlighted. Is there any numbers or just statistics that you can provide to give us context of working families, how many children, those types of numbers that might help to paint a better picture of the broader issue here?
Sure. So right now we're serving an average about 125,000 people per month through Hawaii Food Bank. And we work with about 200 partner agencies. So we're not necessarily doing a lot of direct distribution, but and back to the idea of not seeing, these long lines on the freeway anymore. It's not fair to ask people to wait in line for 3 hours to get food. So we really value our network. We work with nonprofits, with churches. So ideally, you can go into community where you live and get access to the resources that you need. But right now, we are seeing more and more people that we serve are employed. Right now, about 30% of the individuals that we're supporting or households are employed. And these are families that have always been able to make ends meet. We are, again, I mentioned earlier, we're getting more every month. Our numbers are ticking up, and we're seeing people who have never had to ask for help before. They've always been able to make ends meet. And the cost of living, the cost of food, we were looking at the cost of groceries, food at home between February 2020 and February 2023. Those prices have gone up 25%. That's a lot. That's insane. And so families that, have always been able to make ends meet, yes, employed, sometimes two working families, sometimes folks holding down more than one job and simply don't have enough to be able to put a healthy meal on the table for their families.
And Amy, talk about that $200 that you were talking about. We know that in other areas that has gone away more quickly. So there is some data, not necessarily for Hawaii, but you can kind of look at what is to come. That term hunger cliff, if you could go a little deeper on what that actually looks like and what difference that $200 can make.
$200 doesn't go as far as it did, a few years ago, but it can mean the difference for families between being able to put dinner on the table every night and maybe having to skip a meal. We know that there are other states where they saw a 30% increase in utilization from the Charitable Food Network after the end of the SNAP cliff. We also, that could extend over time, as Daniela said. People are really self-sufficient here. There's sometimes stigma attached with asking for help. So we know there are families who may need support and either they don't know where to go or they're ashamed to ask for it. And that's something that we really feel strongly about. Everybody deserves equitable access to safe and healthy food. So there's resources out there. You can go to the food bank's website. You can call 211. But we hope that people that do need help are willing to ask for it because we're here for you.
When you think of this issue of homelessness, a lot of times, it is obviously something that companies get involved with. We see food drives, we see different ways in which people are helping to assist in this. And while all those efforts do help, you often have to take a step back and look at how do we solve this from a more micro level, like taking it all the way to the top beyond just providing food. There are a lot of issues with this issue of hunger. Overall. Daniela, I'm wondering if you can speak to some of the efforts that are being made to not only continue to provide services like what the food bank does for those individuals who need food, but what are some of the steps and measures that are being done to address maybe this from a much broader level, whether it be public policies, other ways in which we're framing sustainability, how else do we address this issue of hunger beyond just meeting people where they're at by providing, canned goods?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I'm so glad you asked that, because we want to move away from, this charitable model of just always trying to feed the need, right? Is the word. So there's this line, we have to just keep giving food to people, and there's this analogy of the babies in the river, and there's a town that keeps catching these babies coming down the river, and then they keep saving them and finding places of adoption. They set up all of this infrastructure to help these babies. And the idea is, can we go up the stream and find out why all these babies are falling in the river? Maybe we should fix the issue or stem the bleeding. So, going from feed the need to shorten the line. So the legislature, we did champion, both Amy and I and lots of other anti-hunger organizations, several measures that are a lot more ambitious this year than we have in the past. Unfortunately, they didn't go far, but oftentimes first time is just starting the conversation. So, amplifying some of this child nutrition programs, getting more kids on free school lunches, potentially all universal free school meals for all. Amplifying SNAP benefits for SNAP users, so ensuring that the minimum benefits are adequate and that there isn't a cliff when they reach this eligibility threshold that we realize is not actually high enough. But one of the things that I think is really exciting is that for the first time, the anti-hunger community in Hawaii here has really been looking more at anti-poverty measures. So we were championing a child tax credit this year for the first time that actually did pass, which will put more money in the pockets of low-income families and allow them to get an additional refundable tax credit for their childcare. We're also, been having discussions about how can we support better labor practices, paid family leave, things like that, things that help workers and help low-income folks actually be able to, afford not just food, but housing and all of the other things that are so expensive here in Hawaii, so that we can shorten that line and eventually move beyond having to feed the need.
Yeah, Amy, if you could talk about that too, some of the deeper sort of legislative changes or policy changes that you think could be enacted that could actually help to address this issue in a different way.
Sure. So, like Daniela said, I think hunger or food insecurity is just one way that an aspect of poverty. The issue food insecurity in Hawaii is not that we don't have enough food. It's that we don't have equitable access to food, that people don't have the funds that they need to purchase the food to feed their families. So I think really thinking about food insecurity as part of this broader picture of affordability and why are we not able to make sure everyone has enough to eat? I think some of the child nutrition programs, universal school lunches, things that Daniela said, some of the additional anti-poverty measures. I think last year we were really happy that we saw the minimum wage increase. I think, being sure that everyone can, if you're employed, you should be able to make enough money to feed your family, and we shouldn't expect people to need to work more than one job. I think we are also looking at additional ways to get people connected with benefits that can help support them. So the food bank is just now launching a SNAP outreach program, where we can send outreach workers out to our distribution sites to help connect people with benefits that might already be there for them. Additional, child nutrition programs, we're really trying to sponsor more of those so that we bring additional federal dollars to the state that help, again, go to feed our community. And then I think longer term, another thing that we are really thinking about is our food system here in Hawaii, and how do we help to support the food system? One of the things the food bank did right at the beginning of the pandemic was a partnership with the Hawaii Farm Bureau, and we initially committed to about $200,000 of purchasing local product, because for many of our farmers, all of a sudden their market dried up, the restaurants and the hotels all closed, and they had nowhere to sell their good, healthy food. So Food Bank teamed up with the Hawaii Farm Bureau, and we just actually celebrated the 3rd birthday of our Farm to Food Bank program. But we right now are purchasing between 40 and 50,000 pounds of local, fresh local produce from local farmers every week. And that's just so important to get to the families that we're serving. So as Daniela said earlier, one way that we see food insecurity is people have to make choices between the kinds of food that they're providing to their families. And we know that produce is one of the first things that falls off people's grocery list because it's expensive and it doesn't last. And so people will make the choice to more processed food, cheaper calories, just to be sure that they can, meet their hunger needs, but not necessarily their nutritional needs. And so that's something that we're really looking forward to continuing to grow, partnering with the local agricultural sector. How do we help to support that system, and at the same time get more healthy produce to our community? Right now, between 25 and 30% of the food we're distributing is fresh produce, which I know isn't the first thing that people think of when they think of Hawaii Food Bank, but in fact, it's the number one food category that we distribute right now is fresh produce.
Yeah, and Daniela, I want to ask you to kind of jump in on this topic of sustainability, because I don't think often people connect hunger with sustainability directly in the way that Amy is sort of presenting these efforts to join with local farmers. Beyond just some of the efforts that Amy just discussed, what other ways do you think is taking this issue of hunger and tying it to the overall sustainability of the state? How else and what other methods might be useful moving forward to help these two topics, which seemingly always come up in discussion about Hawaii's future? How do we close that gap to bring these two closer together to help complement each other?
Yeah, this is a really important point. And I think that just to frame what Amy said another way, one of the great ironies or tragedies of food insecurity in Hawaii is that the folks that are in our food systems, ones that are growing our food, farm workers, subsistence farmers, hospitality workers, are oftentimes the ones that are lining up for food. The ones that grow our food are oftentimes the ones that are the most food insecure. So right there, it's just, there's obviously some disconnect that's happening. One of the other legislative initiatives that we were championing this session is to expand a program called DeBucks. It's run by the Hawaii Food Basket. It's statewide, and we're trying to expand it to more grocery stores. So basically, it would provide a half-off discount for any local produce that's sold in grocery stores to SNAP users. So this is great because it supports farmers. It supports the grocery stores because they're getting paid the same amount. So it increases their produce sales, and of course, it supports families. So it's this triple win, and it really just supports the people that need it the most, and at all of those levels. So that's one way that we can do this. Farm to school, using institutional purchasing to provide those free school lunches to kids. Ways that we can connect local farmers through the emergency food system, because not necessarily everyone can afford, to go to Whole Foods or go to a farm to table restaurant. So looking at, those are markets, SNAP, we get anywhere between 500 and 900,000, 500 million, 900 million a year in SNAP funding. How much of that can we keep circulating in our economy and giving directly to our local farmers? One more point I want to make is that this is kind of unique to Hawaii. When we're in national conversations or conferences about food security, it is very focused on these federal nutrition programs and just getting food to people. But in Hawaii, there is this element of we need to support our local farmers. And that comes again and again because we are so isolated, and because it's part of our value system. It's part of this, how can we support our farmers, because it's what we believe in, and support our land and support the people that are growing our food. And I think that that's really one of the opportunities that we bring to this conversation that other states don't have.
It is such an important and interesting connection. Amy, I want to bring you back to sort of where we started, which is to talk about, these relief dollars are drying up. How long do you think it will be for us to actually see and feel the impacts? You talk about a cliff. Does that mean that, you think in a month from now we see it right away, or will this take some time to actually feel the impact of this money going away?
That's a good question. And my guess is that we'll continue to see an increasing need. One of the things that's really interesting about these big economic shakeups is that they have a really long tail. So if we look at the recession in 2008, it actually took 10 years for food insecurity levels to recover to what they were prior to the recession. So, and I think Daniela said this earlier, folks will put you put your groceries on a credit card. People will go into debt. People will do everything that they can to be sure that they can, feed their kids a healthy meal. And so it takes a lot of time for people to get out of that. So I think we'll continue to see the need ratchet up. And at the same time, there's not necessarily will be done in a year or will be done in 2 years. And I think this is something that really affects people. And on top of that, I do think that the increase in food prices and just the cost of living in Hawaii, we live in the most expensive state in the nation. And on top of that, our food prices continue to go up and up. I think that there's also folks that have been needing to come to the food bank, even though they receive SNAP benefits, because they just, again, even though you have a job and you are receiving federal benefits, it's still not enough.
Amy, I'm not sure that you necessarily have direct numbers, and we're not maybe necessarily asking for that. I think what I wanted to get a better context of is where we were pre-pandemic with just the overall numbers of those who were, say, utilizing the service of a food bank. And then we saw that significant jump during the pandemic with more people and those long lines, at Aloha Stadium and so forth. How has the pandemic elevated the services? And since then, have we seen sort of a decline back to those pre-pandemic levels, or are those numbers holding pretty consistent?
So when the pandemic first hit, our numbers doubled. They really skyrocketed. So many families were affected overnight and needed help. Over time, over the first year or so, we saw those numbers start to come down until we were holding steady at about 30 to 40%, 50% more than we did prior to the pandemic. And it fluctuates every month. About a year ago, so starting last spring, we saw those numbers really start to tick up. And it was slow and steady again. Some months it would go up, 5,000 people, then it would go back down. But right now, a year ago, we were serving about 100,000 people on average. And right now we're up again at 125,000 people. The height of the pandemic, we were at 175,000. So we are definitely seeing those numbers tick back up.
Yeah, and Daniela, can you talk about the impact that this has on individuals? I mean, we know the immediate impact being hungry, of course, and that is very significant. But can you talk about the deeper stresses or the anxiety this may cause, the impact to learning for kids? I mean, what do we see? What is the effect, especially when this is sustained for a period of time?
I mean, food and housing are the most basic needs, and if those two things aren't being met, everything else is going to go, downhill. So yes, stress. We see, the dual-edged, issue of food insecurity and all of these health problems. Obesity, metabolic disorders, diabetes, those kinds of things. They follow with food security hand in hand, again, because getting that cheap food, those cheap calories, it's just really not good for your body. So then you get, increasing healthcare costs. You get kids showing up to school without having a healthy breakfast and not being able to concentrate and failing out of their classes. So it really has this ripple effect. Food is, most basic need that we have as humans. And when we're not getting enough of it or we're not getting enough healthy food, it really affects all areas of our lives.
Let me just, sorry, I just want to jump in on that too, because I think, our two most vulnerable populations for food insecurity in Hawaii are keiki and our kupuna. And we know, as Daniela said, we know that being food insecure does cause a lot of issues for kids in school in terms of concentration, how they do. And then we're also setting some of these young people up for a, future of potentially significant health issues and greater costs. And then for our kupuna, I want to just share one thing that it was a stat that really impacted me when I heard it for the first time, which is, we have so many multi-generational households in Hawaii, right? Where you have the grandparents and the parents, the kids all living together, many times because of economics. But if you are a kupuna living in a multi-generational household, you are at much higher risk for food insecurity than if you live alone. And that just really hit me hard, because we know what's happening is those grandparents are giving up their food and going without so that the keiki have enough to eat. And that's just not right. I think as we really think about what kind of society, who do we want to be as a place? And like Daniela said, we're lucky. We live in it's such a special place in Hawaii where people do take care of each other, and we take care of as we think about how do we take care of this land and how do we take care of each other, that idea of the grandparent going without because they're trying to take care of their grandchild, I really feel like all of us need to really stand up and say that that's not okay. It's not okay for kids to go to bed hungry at night. It's not okay for our kupuna to go to bed hungry at night. We need to be able to take care of each other.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We are wrapping up, but I do also want to end on a positive note as well, Daniela. And then what I was going to ask you is that for, all these issues and for those that are suffering, I imagine you have seen people who have found success, who have gotten off maybe these lists or these services. What can you share about just some of how the efforts that you folks are undertaking and trying to help people, some of maybe the highlights and successes of people and how they're able to move beyond some of the needs and services that you folks provide?
Hi, this is, a crisis begets opportunity. And we, like I said, are seeing some really exciting initiatives coming forward on the national scale. So this is, the Farm Bill is going to be renegotiated, giving us the opportunity to put in place some funding for really innovative things. But then at the state level, all kinds of things that we never thought we would be having the conversation about, funding and resourcing these programs is also happening. But as far as how we're going to get people from, this crisis state to out of it, one of the things our organization thinks is really important is we should give them roles and leadership positions in the movement. People that are passionate about this because they have lived it. We want to bring them into the conversation. We want to hire them. We want to pay them to help us fix this problem. And so we think that integrating, bringing those folks into the movement, whether they're passionate about, food security or affordable housing or whatever the issue that speaks the most to them is, we need to be paying them to help us fix it. Because it does take people and it's going to take a lot of political will. And, the more people that we can bring into the conversation that have actually lived experience, I think that it's going to make it, that much more powerful.
Yeah, and Amy, I want to ask you if you could end by telling us, first of all, for the folks who may be experiencing this need, you talked about some of the shame that they may be feeling about how best to go about getting those needs met, and really, where is the best place to turn for resources? And on the other side, people who would like to help your organization and to help with these initiatives, what's the best way? I think, a lot of folks just wait for once a year when the food drives come around, but in the meantime, what are some ways that people can help right away?
Sure. So I would say go to our website. It's www.hawaiifoodbank.org. And there's a button for Get Help. If you click on that, it'll give you access to all of the different, all of our partners, places, hopefully right in your community where you might be able to get support. And on the other side, hey, if you want to get involved, there's lots of ways that people can get involved, whether it's donating, volunteering. I will say we also have so many people that are success stories that have experienced food insecurity, and they want to give back. So many of our volunteers had previously experienced food insecurity, and then they want to be part of the solution. We have staff members, same thing, and it is a really special feeling to be able to be part of that solution. But yeah, don't wait for your food drive to come around. You can have a food drive yourself. We always have, there's sections on the website if you want to start a food drive or a fun drive in your own community, at your school. And then we have what we call Fight Hunger Hui, which is a way for people just to make a regular donation every month. So, hey, it's actually much more efficient for all of us. You don't need to drive to the store to buy food and donate to the food bank. We can really stretch that dollar. Every dollar donated to the food bank, we can provide food for more than 2 meals with that dollar. So we have a lot of relationships and buying power, so we can make your dollar go a lot further than any of us could do on our own.
Okay, well, Amy Miller, Marvin of the Hawaii Food Bank, and Daniela Spoto from Hawaii Appleseed, thank you so much for joining us and highlighting this issue. We really appreciate all the information you shared with us, as well as the work that you continue to do in our community to help those in need. Mahalo. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Mahalo.
Thank you. Very interesting and sobering, Ryan, to hear some of those statistics. The thought that, 1 in 6 people in Hawaii, generally 1 in 4 keiki in our community experiencing food insecurity is really quite stunning. And it's something that we did see those big lines outside Aloha Stadium during the peak of the pandemic, but now those kinds of, distribution centers have gone away, but the need has not. Clearly, the food bank serving, I think she said, close to 120,000 people a month, and all of the work that Appleseed is doing to fight hunger and to track these initiatives. To try to make it so that fewer and fewer people in our community are experiencing this. Also interesting to hear how it also ties to the food insecurity issue that our state experiences overall.
Yeah, really just tying together the overall sustainability efforts that, again, we've heard many politicians talk about. We hear it almost every election cycle about gaining and growing Hawaii's base to not be so reliant on those things that are imported, those goods that are necessary. And so really finding opportunities for this issue of hunger and the sustainability issue to find some commonality and support one another through some of the initiatives that they are pushing through the legislature. You heard there Daniela saying that not everything that they would have wanted was able to pass through this legislative session, but it's just beginning the conversation and beginning to plant that seed so that this can continue to move forward in a direction that will allow for things like universal free lunches and free food for students, expanding upon a farm to school program and really supporting some more of the local farmers. And because that is one of the things in our conversations that we've had also with local farmers is being able to provide them with a consistent market. Many times these farmers struggle because they don't have the consistency of a market. So by being able to support them through efforts like a public school initiative that will guarantee these farmers more product, it overall will help the sustainability of these farmers and their lifeline grow. So really great to see how these two are trying to intersect to help two issues that continue to be discussed in our community.
Yeah, we know that those benefits did go away in March. We are going to be tracking this issue very closely as the federal government winds down a lot of benefits. We see May 11th also is going to be bringing some big changes when it comes to COVID relief for covering testing, for instance. But this is something that went away in March already. So that hunger cliff that they both talked about, what will we see here in Hawaii? We'll be tracking that. It's a little bit too early to tell as those benefits just recently went away, but it's something that we will be following in the months to come. And we appreciate both of our guests on this issue. On Friday, we are going to be taking the day off. Ryan, you've got a very busy schedule, and we'll talk about that. And then Monday, we'll be back here with Neil Milner and Colin Moore, both two political powerhouses here in the state of Hawaii, talking about what happened at the legislature this session. How did the new governor fare in his cabinet nominees and getting those folks confirmed? Did he get the initiatives that he wanted to already? We're seeing a lot of those not getting passed. And so what is the ultimate sort of tally, if you will, for this new administration, and how do they move forward? Before we let you go, though, tell us what it's like on the road right now.
Well, it's pretty cold. I think a lot of caught us by a little surprise. But as I said earlier, I'm here in Fairfax, Virginia, covering the Hawaii men's volleyball team as they begin their first competition begins tomorrow on Thursday against Penn State in the national semifinals. Of course, Hawaii looking to become a 3-time national champion. I'm surprised to see how many Hawaii folks have made the trek all the way to the East Coast. There is a lot of green, a lot of H's being worn here around the community. And so it's going to be exciting to see. The team seems very focused. We just came back from the team practice just a few minutes before this program. And so we are actually on our way right now. We are leaving for the All-American banquet and where the player of the year will be named. And I can tell you Hawaii fans are going to want to stay tuned because a high probability is a player of the year is coming from Hawaii. So a lot of fun things happening here. And unfortunately, we will be taking Friday off as well. But we will all see you back here for our next episode of Spotlight Hawaii on Monday. Until then, take care and aloha.
Aloha.